Hello, fellow collectors. Welcome back to the TTM Show. This is Frank M. TTM. TTM stands for Through the Mail. This is Through the Mail Autographs. This is Episode 8. Calling this one Mr. Basketball. A Dynasty Begins. So I just have one TTM to share with you today, but it is a good one. This is postmarked from Boston, Massachusetts. This is one card sent, one card signed, 7 days, no fee. We have Mr. Bob Cousy. Mr. Bob Cousy here, otherwise known as Mr. Basketball or Houdini of the Hardwood or just plain old Coos. This is on the 2001-2002 Upper Deck Legends card with the cool inscription to Frank Peace. I love how he gives those cool inscriptions. Bob Cousy played 14 seasons in the NBA, 13 of them with my Boston Celtics from 50 to 63. He played a short stint with the Cincinnati Royals in 69-70 as a player coach. He stood at 6'1", 175 pounds during his playing days. He's a right-handed shooter, ambidextrous as well. He could shoot from both hands. Mr. Cousy was one of the greats of the game. In those early days of the NBA, he brought the Celtics into contention, into a dynasty. Looking nice there on this Upper Deck card. It's quite sweet. Thank you so much, Mr. Cousy. Robert Joseph Cousy was born on August 9th, 1928 in Manhattan, New York. The only son of poor French immigrants living in New York City. He grew up in the multi-ethnical Yorkville neighborhood of Manhattan's East Side, in the midst of the Great Depression. Cousy took up basketball at 13 years old, and according to him, was immediately hooked. Playing basketball at Andrew Jackson High School in St. Albans, his basketball success was not immediate. In fact, he was cut from the school team his first 2 years, though he honed his skills playing for the St. Albans Lindens of the Press League. During his second year, he had a seemingly unfortunate incident of breaking his right hand falling out of a tree. The injury forced him to play left-handed into his hand healed, making him effectively ambidextrous. In retrospect, Cousy described the accident as a fortunate event and cited it as a factor in making him more versatile on the court. During a press league game, the high school basketball coach saw him play. He was impressed by the budding star's two-handed ability, invited Cousy to come to practice the following day to try out for the junior varsity team. He made the team, and by halfway through the season, he was on the varsity team, scoring 28 points in his first game. Cousy went on to win the scoring championship as a senior. Cousy went on to Holy Cross in Worcester, Massachusetts on scholarship after high school, where he selected three-time All-American, leading the Crusaders to berths in the 1948 and 1950 NCAA tournaments, and 26 straight wins and a number 4 national ranking during his senior year. Out of Holy Cross, Cousy was picked by the Tri-City Blackhawks, now the Atlanta Hawks, with the 4th overall pick in the 1950 NBA draft. The Boston Celtics had just concluded the 1949-50 NBA season with a poor 22-46 win-loss record and had the first draft pick. It was strongly anticipated they would draft the highly coveted local favorite Cousy. However, Coach Red Auerbach snubbed him for center Charlie Scheer, saying, "Am I supposed to win or please the local yokels?" The local press strongly criticized Auerbach. Cousy was unenthusiastic about his new employer, the Blackhawks. He was trying to establish a driving school in Worcester, Massachusetts, did not want to relocate to the Midwestern Triangle of 3 small towns of Moline, Illinois, Rock Island, Illinois, and Davenport, Iowa. As compensation for having to give up his driving school, Cousy demanded a salary of $10,000 from the Blackhawks owner, Ben Kerner. When Kerner only offered $6,000, Cousy refused to report. Cousy was then picked up by the Chicago Stags, but when they folded, League Commissioner Maurice Podoloff declared 3 Stags a bill for a dispersal draft. Team scoring leader Mark Zolowski, Andy Phillip, and Cousy. Celtic owner Walter A. Brown was one of the 3 club bosses invited. He later made it clear that he was hoping for Zalewski would have tolerated Phillip, did not want Cousy. When the Celtics drew Cousy, Brown confessed, "I could have fallen to the floor." Brown directly gave him a $9,000 salary. Cousy changed the minds of his employees quickly with an impressive rookie season, averaging 15.6 points per game, 6.9 rebounds per game, and 4.9 assists per game, and receiving the first of his 13 consecutive NBA All-Star selections as the team reached the first round of the playoffs after a dismal 49-50 season. This was before the Celtics dynasty. None of the 17 championship banners were hanging up in the Boston Garden yet, including 6 banners that Cousy helped bring to Boston in the late 50s, early 60s. Though, some may say March 21st, 1953 was the day the dynasty began, with an unbelievable performance from a man they would call the Houdini of hardwood, point guard Bob Cousy. The 1952-53 season was Cousy's third in the NBA. The previous 2 seasons, which included an impressive second campaign where he averaged 21.7 points per game, 6.4 rebounds, and up in his assists to 6.7 per game, en route to his first All-NBA first-team nomination. The Celtics made it to the first round of the playoffs twice, but lost to the New York Knicks in both series. Along with Cousy, the Celtics team included future Basketball Hall of Famers 6'8" center power forward Easy Ed Macaulay, 6'5" small forward power forward Chuck Cooper, the first African-American player in the NBA, and 6'2" shooting guard Bones McKinney, among other solid role players. Hopes were high for Boston, but Cousy led the league in assists with 7.7, his first of 8 straight years of leading the league in assists. The Celtics ended up the season with a 46-25 record, in third place a game and a half behind the New York Knicks, and a game behind second place Syracuse Nationals. And consider, Cousy's assist numbers were made despite the fact that the NBA had not yet introduced a shot clock, making the game static and putting prolific assist givers at a disadvantage. The Celtics faced the Syracuse Nationals in round 1 of the playoffs. Winner in the best of 3 series to face the New York Knicks in round 2. The Celtics won Game 1 in Syracuse on March 19, 1953, 87-81. A winning Game 2 would guarantee the Celtics their first advancement past the first round of the playoffs in franchise history. Cousy scored 20 points in Game 1 and was coming into the Game 2 with an injured leg, which did not deter him. He played spectacular, leading the Celtics to an epic quadruple overtime victory. Cousy played 66 minutes and scored 50 points after making a still-standing record of 30 free throws and 32 attempts. This game is regarded by the NBA as one of the finest scoring feats ever, in line with Wilt Chamberlain's 100-point game. The Boston Sunday Globe headline the next day read, "Cousy does everything in victory but takes tickets. Floor play, foul shots, save game. Star sets 2 Boston records." Globe writer John Ahan wrote, "A woman fan, tears streaming down her face, held on to her young son and kept saying, 'It's impossible. He did it all by himself.'" With a bit of prophetic keenness, he writes, a Syracuse writer, too jittery to light a cigarette, kept insisting, "He's the greatest thing anybody ever will see anyplace. He beat this league all by himself. He'll bring the championship back to Boston for you guys. He's the one who can do it." Ahern continued, "If there were one person who can bring the Braves back from Milwaukee, it would have been Bob Cousy yesterday afternoon. He could have done anything. The Coos, drawn and pale and operating on a leg that threatened to buckle under him any second, put on the greatest one-man show ever seen in Boston Garden or any other place in this town during the 3-hour, 11-minute stretch that seemed an eternity to 11,053 limp fans." The last line of the game description reads, "The Coos did everything but take tickets." And that he did, and not only one, but the first 6 championships in Celtics franchise history. But not to get ahead of ourselves. A 1979 article from Sports Illustrated does a fine job describing the game action on that fateful day of March 21st, 1953 in Boston, Massachusetts. By Mark Onigman. No playoff game was ever as fouled up as Syracuse versus Boston in 1953. Quadruple overtime, 106 personal fouls. Players fighting players. Players fighting the police. The winning team shot 41% from the floor, but sank 37 straight free throws. One player scored 7 points in the first half, but ended up with 50. When it was all over, 12 players had fouled out, 2 had been thrown out, and the hometown PR man nearly passed out. The wild game was the second deciding contest in the first round playoffs, following the 1952-53 NBA season, for Red Auerbach's Boston Celtics. Back then, the Celtics had to scramble for playoff berths just like everyone else. And in this game, Boston and arch rival Syracuse were battling for the right to meet Eastern champion Knicks. The heated rivalry centered around Boston's Bob Cousy and Syracuse's Paul Seymour. Auerbach recalls that Seymour always played it rough with Cousy despite the coach's loud protest. I warned everybody, Syracuse, the league, the press. If Seymour kept it up, we would just have to do unto others, says Auerbach. In the early 50s, strategic fouls were part of every team's defensive strategy. In certain situations, when your man crossed the midcourt line, you fouled him. You got only one shot, and even if it went in, you got the ball and a chance for a field goal. But not all fouls were strategic. Some of them were manifestations of the rough play characteristic of the era. Today, players normally try to avoid fights, says Cousy. Why risk getting hurt and jeopardizing a fat, long-term contract? Second, because of the Players Association and this anti-management stance that has developed with the advent of agents. The players view each other as colleagues, not enemies. Such was not the case on March 21st, 1953, when the Celtics and the Nationals met in crowded Boston Garden. Syracuse ran off to an 8-zip lead, but Boston went in front 22-21 at the end of the first quarter when Cousy threw in a 30-footer at the buzzer. Seymour, as expected, had been all over Cousy, so Auerbach put Burley, Bob Brayman into the lineup to do the same onto Syracuse's big gun, Dolph Schayes. At 3:47 of the second period, round one began. After mutual elbowing and shoving, Schayes and Burnham squared off and threw enough punches to get whistled out of the game. When Boston policemen charged onto the court to break up the brawl, round two began. Syracuse's Billy Gabber took exception to police interference and mixed it up with the cops. After 5 minutes, the melee subsided and the game continued. But so did the roughness. While there weren't any fights, lots of fouls were called on both teams. Lots of fouls. At the half, Boston trailed 42-40. The Celtics led 62-59 at the end of the third period. And as regulation time ran out, Boston trailed 77-76. But Cousy had been fouled at the buzzer. He converted the free throw and the game went into overtime. In the first of 4 extra periods, Cousy scored 6 of Boston's 9 points, but Syracuse kept pace. The strategy was to get the ball to Cousy, recalled Auerbach. If they fouled him, fine. 5 of the guys had fouled out. 1 had been ejected, and of the 5 guys they had on the floor, 3 had 6 or more personal fouls. The only reason they were in the game was that the rules won't let you play with fewer than 5 men. If one of those 3 fouled Cousy, it was an automatic technical, a 2-shot. When the game went into overtime number 2, Boston owner Walter Brown left his box to have coffee in his office. He couldn't take the pressure any longer. His public relations man, Howie McHugh, was stretched on the floor, overcome by excitement. Cousy had called it perhaps the most draining game I've ever played. The second overtime ended with the score 90-90. The Celtics were down to 5 men as the third overtime began, and 4 of those already had 5 fouls. With only 18 seconds left in the period, the Celtics trailed 97-95. Cousy was fouled and sank 2 free throws, the foul shot and the tech to tie the score. Syracuse then threw in a basket. Boston took a timeout with 3 seconds left. The ball was inbounded to Cousy. He tried a 20-foot push shot and went in. It was 99-all, quadruple overtime. In the 4th extra period, Chuck Cooper of Boston picked up his 6th personal. Syracuse would now get 2 free throws every time Cooper committed a non-shooting foul. Cooper's 6 personals seemed to revive Syracuse. The Nats rang up 5 straight points, and quickly it was 104-99 Syracuse with 3:30 left. But Cousy drew another foul, made the free throw, tipped in a missed shot seconds later, stole a national pass, scored on a left-handed backhand layup, 104-104. With 2:32 left, Boston John Mencken sank a free throw. Kenny Rollins did the same. Boston was up by 2, 106-104. For Syracuse, the game was out of reach. Final score 111-105. The list of records set in one game is spectacular. Cousy ended up with 50 points, breaking George Macon's playoff mark of 47 and Ed McCauley's Garden record of 46. His 30 for 32 performance from the line still stands as a record for either a playoff or regular season game. At one point in overtime, Cousy sank 18 straight. 12 men had fouled out, 7 for Syracuse, 5 for Boston, another record. The 106 personals were the most ever in a playoff game. The teams also set records for free throw attempts, 128, and free throws made, 108, that are still in the books. Boston's record of 57 conversions will probably never be broken, given the current rules. Though the Celtics went on to draw 3 out of 4 to the Knicks in the semifinals, it was anticlimactic. The 1952-53 season was the first time Boston had ever made it past the opening round. Of course, there was always next year. In the next, it was an auspicious beginning for the Celtic dynasty. Indeed it was a beautiful start to the Celtics dynasty, what now has 17 banners, 17 championships. It all started with Bob Cousy and that 53 team and ended up winning his first championship in 1957. Of course, he was assist leader at 8 straight seasons, 13-time All-Star, 2-time All-Star MVP, 1957 League MVP, 12-time All-NBA team, and of course, I said before, 6-time NBA champion, 1957, 1959 to 1963. Bob retired in 1963 from the Celtics. Then he made a comeback in the Cincinnati Royals in the 69-70 season, appeared in 7 games with the Royals as a player coach, coaching the team through the 73-74 season. The team renamed the Kansas City Omaha Kings. And his career stats, Bob Cousy played 924 games, averaged 18.4 points per game, 5.2 rebounds per game, and 7.5 assists per game. As a coach, he did coach with Boston College from 63 to 69, the .750 winning percentage. And of course, I said before, with the Cincinnati Royals / Kansas City Omaha Kings, the .405 winning percentage. And after his career, he also spent time as a broadcaster with the Celtics in the 80s. I remember him a lot for that. He's part of the NBA's 75th anniversary team. His number 14 is retired by the Boston Celtics. He was inducted into the Basketball Hall of Fame in 1971. Got the Presidential Medal of Freedom in 2019. Just an FYI here, his daughter left a note in here. It's just saying, "Dear sir, my dad is signing. He's not able to answer questions." I did answer a few questions from Tisha Cousy. Thank you so much, Mr. Cousy. I do appreciate you taking your time to sign my card. And I thank you for joining me in another TTM show. This show here called Mr. Basketball. Thank you so much. I want to say take care. God bless. Peace.
Bob Cousy, Boston's hardwood Houdini.
Bob Cousy has dazzled countless fans with his thrilling brand of basketball.
I credit Bob Cousy, one of the guys that saved the NBA.